The way that the Ents are depicted in the Lord of the Rings movies is wrong and has forever changed how the Ents are viewed in the popular imagination, contrary to the intentions of J.R.R. Tolkien himself. In the movies, the Ents are shown to be plain trees essentially, whose fantastical element is that they are alive. In simple terms, Treebeard and the rest are shown to be trees like any other tree in terms of their appearance and biological makeup, with the additional supernatural abilities of talking and interacting with our protagonists and their environment. This depiction, combined with the popularity of this incredible piece of media, has solidified their position in popular culture as the Ents just being living trees. The reality is quite the opposite, and in this video we'll explore what the Ents actually are, some theories on how they reproduce, as well as their true appearance and nature in Tolkien's vision. But to start off, what even are the Ents anyway? When Aule the Smith created the race of the dwarves, and Eri Ilúvatar blessed them with the flame imperishable and granted them life, Yavanna the Lady of Growth predicted that her beautiful trees would be endangered by Aule's creation. As such, she pleaded with Ilúvatar and the Valar that the trees required guardians, shepherds which would protect them from the dangers of the outside world. Ilúvatar, granting Yavanna her wish, sent spirits to the forests, and the Ents were born sometime alongside the awakening of the very first elves of Middle-earth, which would soon find them and speak to them, teaching the Ents language and curing them of their dumbness, as Treebeard put it. The first matter that should be discussed is naturally the nature of these spirits. According to Tolkien himself, there were only two alternatives regarding the matter. Ilúvatar either sent spirits to reside within actual trees, or the most likely scenario in my opinion, he sent spirits which took a form resembling a tree due to their love of them. The reason why I think the latter is most likely the case is because within the text itself we see numerous times in which Treebeard not only makes a clear distinction between Ents and trees in general, but also through Tolkien's very description of them. Again and again, the Ents are noted for their man-like and even troll-like characteristics, and the existence of the Entwives and their role in producing the Entlings indicates the existence of a creature very distinct from a tree and more resembling a mammal. This is because, as I mentioned, the alternative would be, quite literally, spirits within the bodies of actual trees. And while yes, these bodies could change as the spirits took possession of them, I think the way they are portrayed indicates Tolkien's intentions of the Ents and the trees being, in a biological sense, unrelated. Based on this logic within the lore, the Ents are not trees, but instead creatures that were sent to protect the trees and in that process took many tree-like characteristics and behaviors throughout their millennia as the shepherds of the forests. On the other hand, within the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy, what we see are massive humanoid creatures that, as showcased here, are portrayed as trees in the shape of a man. They have human-like faces, limbs, and language, but they nonetheless remain pieces of wood. They give off the impression that they are indeed just trees that are alive and look like people, kind of. Nothing more and nothing less. What that impression has caused is that for a lot of people, the Ents are indeed just living trees. To showcase the difference between the Peter Jackson portrayal and the Lord of the Rings books, this is a description found within the Two Towers. They found that they were looking at a most extraordinary face. It belonged to a large, man-like, almost troll-like figure, at least 14 foot high, very sturdy with a tall head and hardly any neck. Whether it was clad in stuff like green and grey bark, or whether that was its hide was difficult to say. At any rate, the arms at a short distance from the trunk were not wrinkled, but covered with a brown, smooth skin. The large feet had 7 toes each. The lower part of the long face was covered with a sweeping grey beard, bushy, almost twiggy at the roots, thin and mossy at the ends, but at the moment the hobbits noted little but the eyes. These deep eyes were now surveying them, slow and solemn, but very penetrating. As opposed to the more tree-like and wooden portrayal of the movies, you can see that the nature of the Ents from within the text is quite different. For starters, it is noted that the hobbits were indeed uncertain of what exactly its exterior was made out of, not being able to tell whether it was a creature's hide or the actual characteristics of a tree. Even more important than this uncertain statement, however, is the definitive statement that the surface of Treebeard was smooth, and not only smooth, but specifically identified as skin. That is a very specific description of a creature that looks like a tree, camouflaged within a forest while becoming a part of its surroundings, but which is nonetheless not made out of wood and not at all the way it is depicted on screen. Whereas the Ents were more similar to the children of Ilúvatar and may have even been mammals according to some theories regarding reproduction with the Entwives, the most popular view of them has become that they were trees that happened to be alive and cared for the other trees. In fact, they were so similar to the other children of Ilúvatar that through Tolkien's descriptions, we get a picture of their day-to-day life and how they live. They don't normally stand around like trees, they have actual houses they live in. They have tables to sit and beds to sleep, furniture. They are a lot closer to humanity than most realize. The truth is that within Tolkien's writings we are painted a very complicated picture with overarching lore, behind which are decisions made for a variety of reasons. Within the Two Towers, Treebeard says that, "We are tree herds, we old Ents. Few enough of us are left now. Sheep get like shepherd, and shepherds like sheep, but slowly, and neither have long in the world. It is quicker and closer with trees and Ents, and they walk down the ages together." In this passage, what Treebeard essentially says is that the Ents, through their love and exposure to the forests, grow closer and closer to them, like a shepherd would with his sheep, or a dog owner with his dog, and vice versa. However, he goes even further as to say that the Ents and the trees may be as similar as they are due to their long lives and the amount of time that they can spend together. Unlike a mortal man and his sheep, Treebeard is over 10,000 years old, and as such, he is infinitely more likely, after so many years, to be more like a tree. As he himself says, due to their long lives, the process he describes with the shepherd and the sheep is, simply put, quicker and closer with the Ents and the trees. Beyond that, with the waning of the world, the Ents become sleepier, and in the darkness of the forest, these creatures that already resemble trees to begin with may actually be mistaken for them by an unsuspecting onlooker like Merry and Pippin. This does not change the fact that they are very different creatures that, in their isolation, have shut out the rest of the world. "The trees and the Ents," said Treebeard, "I do not understand all that goes on myself, so I cannot explain it to you. Some of us are still true Ents and lively enough in our fashion, but many are growing sleepy, going tree-ish, as you might say. Most of the trees are just trees, of course, but many are half awake, some are quite wide awake, and a few are, well, getting Entish. As the Ents are becoming more like the trees they are exposed to and get more and more of their characteristics, the trees themselves are experiencing a similar exposure to the Ents. In fact, the Huorns of the Lord of the Rings may have actually been trees that had gradually gained a higher ability and understanding through the Ents. It should be mentioned, of course, that the opposite may also be true, meaning they were Ents that grew to be more like the trees. Nevertheless, the point that I'm trying to get across is that the Ents were not just fantastical talking trees as they are imagined by many due to the impact of the movies. They were spirits that took the form of man-like creatures that, due to their duty to the forest and the thousands of years of exposure to it, became very similar to the trees in appearance and personality. Nonetheless, they remain organisms more similar to you and I if we wore a tree costume than to an actual talking tree. Lastly, on this subject in general, there is this idea that following the events of The Lord of the Rings, the Ents will turn into actual trees with the passage of time. As you can imagine, this is not the case, and the Ents would never be able to turn into real trees, as they are not related to the trees to begin with. Instead, due to their personality and appearance, they will be nearly indistinguishable but remain Ents anyway. To conclude, although I personally love the movies and this change was in no way a big deal, for me at least, I do think that it removed a few layers of nuance and complexity from a world that is famous for its very nuance and complexity to begin with. Though I do think changing events in order to boost the importance of certain characters, such as Pippin with the beacons and Merry with the Enmund, is more worth talking about, the portrayal of the Ents as being essentially trees subtracted, I think, from the overall wonder of their society. No, they were not trees, they were shepherds sent by God himself to guard the forests, who grew to love them so deeply that both they and the forests became more like one another, and they both shaped each other's destiny towards the end of time, despite their differences. A massive thank you to my channel members, and thank you very much for watching.